The mission of this channel is to apply the principles of what the ancient Hindus used to call Vada, which were a type of debate, the purpose of which was to seek truth rather than win arguments. And the reason we do that is to cultivate the art of thinking clearly with the purpose of discovering knowledge, finding inspiration, and improving decision making. The subject today is financial independence, how I achieved it, and some of the philosophy around what it is I do and how I do it. I can perhaps best illustrate this philosophy through a conversation I had with somebody called Jake and his girlfriend, Sammy, whom I met on a plane trip from Alaska to New York City. Jake was 21 years old, along with his girlfriend. They just graduated from Lehigh University, a very good university of engineering in Pennsylvania. And he seemed a little perturbed. He didn't know what to do with his life. He heard my life story, he derived some inspiration from it, and he asked me the question, what do I do with my life? Quite the question to be asked. So I told him my story. I said, look, I started off on Wall Street as a derivative trader and risk manager. I achieved financial independence early, and now I am a full-time slow traveler, writer, and philanthropist. And the meaning I've come up with, I told Jake, is that one has to aim for financial independence early so one can self-actualize through education and culture. Now, Jake's response was, well, I'm already educated. I have an engineering degree. To which my response was, well, no, you're not. That's vocational training. Engineers, lawyers, doctors, and many others, they get vocational training. It's the way they pay the bills. Now, I have an MBA in finance. I've worked in finance. I have vocational training. So I'm not against vocational training. In fact, you need it to accumulate capital. What I'm suggesting is real education, and that's the way I define it. And it's important to define terms in any debate. I define education as the clear thinking one cultivates through a study of literature, philosophy, and the arts, like music. Now let me define clear thinking. This is an interesting subject because it tends to trigger people sometimes if I claim that they're not clear thinkers. First of all, I'm not always a clear thinker. It's an aspiration I have. I try to cultivate it. But clear thinking just means looking at the data points, assumptions, and conclusions, and evaluating the truthfulness of the assumptions and data points and the validity of the conclusion. Validity simply means, does the conclusion necessarily follow from the data points and assumptions? And data points are just a fancy word for facts, verifiable facts. So with that said, Jake asked me, okay, so how did you get to this model, this goal? And why is it important for me to have goals? And I told him, look, goals are important. You can change them, but you got to be moving towards a goal every day. In fact, if you look at neuroscientists, they will tell you that when you have a goal and you move towards that goal, all kinds of neurotransmitters that are mood transmitters get injected into your body. Neuropinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, these are all mood neurotransmitters. And and they get activated when you move towards a goal. So it's important to have a goal. I have a model that has a goal and has an action plan towards that goal. It's not the only model, it's not the only goal, but this is what I had to share with Jay. So we started off with economic class. John Maynard Keynes, this great economist from Cambridge, divided up post-industrial society into workers, middle class, and investors. Workers generated cash flow from selling labor. The middle class generated cash flow from selling their brains. And the investor class generated cash flow from selling capital. So the objective in my model is to move up these classes and to become part of the investor class, so you have the leisure to pursue education and culture as a means to self-actualization. And by self-actualization, I'm using Maslow, that great psychologist's definition, which is being able to use all of you. Now, a key aspect of this is assumptions. And one thing I noticed is that Jake had the standard assumptions about how to get ahead in life. And the assumptions he had is what his parents passed on to him, and they were the assumptions of perhaps middle-class American society that allows you to be middle class. But I'm talking about becoming investor class. So if you're going to be an investor class, in my opinion, you have to really question some of the assumptions which are inherently biased. So there are 5 questions that I have, or 5 assumptions I question, more accurately. The first is that equity is not the measure of financial success. Equity just means assets minus liabilities. What counts is cash flow. So cash flow is king, equity is not. For example, if I go to buy a masala chai in the streets of Calcutta in India, the chai wala is going to take cash, either in the form of currency or these days more digital payment, but it's cash. I can't show him equity in my house. I can't show him equity in my 401k. I need cash. Cash flow is all that counts. In economic theory, the source of all economic value is cash flow. It's not paper profits, it's cash flow. So cash flow is king, not equity. Second assumption, we retire at 65. Why is that? What's magical about 65? I say retire as early as you can so you can have the leisure to pursue your self-actualization. I have friends who retired at 27 when I was in Wall Street. And one of them has become one of the largest art dealers in the world. You can retire in your 30s, 40s, 50s. 65 makes no sense to me. Therefore, the third assumption is retirement accounts. I hate retirement accounts. They just make no sense for me. Again, in my model, you may disagree. You may want different things. But if your goal is to retire early, what's the point of locking up your capital in a structure that penalizes you if you take out capital before 59 and a half? Because you're going to need that cash flow if you're going to retire early. No debt. We live in a culture that constantly pummels us with basically living beyond our means by taking on debt. But the problem with debt is it creates a fixed cost, and that fixed cost really delays your point of financial independence. So no debt. And then finally, conspicuous consumption. Thorstein Veblen was this great economist who came up with this idea of conspicuous consumption. His premise was that in modern society, the goal becomes status, and we achieve status by signaling our success through conspicuous consumption. But I use probably the most valuable mathematical concept in finance, and that's dx over dy, which is the first derivative in calculus. It basically means trade-offs. When you do this conspicuous consumption, you need to calculate the dx over dy. What are you trading off? And what you'll find is you're trading off time to financial independence. You're pushing out that time frame. You're delaying your financial independence. Concrete example, a $6 cup of coffee at Starbucks. This is 2024 as I tape this. That's what a cup of coffee costs. Probably not even the most expensive at Starbucks. Well, how much does that cup of coffee cost? It's not $6, it's $21. Why is that? Because if you took that $6 and you bought a strip of cash flow, perpetual cash flow, that strip of perpetual cash flow, under reasonable assumptions, would be worth $21. Now that $21 you can translate in a certain number of cents as extra monthly income into perpetuity, or you can value it as a few more seconds delay in the point at which you'll achieve financial independence. So cash flow is king, not equity. 65 is a questionable number to retire. Forget about retirement accounts, no debt, and think about the trade-off in conspicuous consumption. So I went over that with Jake. So he asked me, that's great, now what is your model? So I gave my model, which is really in 4 steps. First, save 40% of your gross income. Second, buy strips of cash flow outside of your retirement account from your first paycheck. 3, pay off your debt. 4, when your cash flow from your portfolio is 7 times your needs, then quit your job and you've achieved financial freedom. Now, this is my story because this is exactly what I did, and if I did it, everybody can do it, and that's what is kind of inspiring to me. One day I woke up and I realized that I didn't want to go to work, and I was working on Wall Street, so I guess relative to the average population, I was making quite a bit of money, but I was still a wage slave. I earned a salary and a bonus, and I still had to get to work because I had to earn that wage. I was working for the man. But then why was I still working if I made all that money? And the answer is I had debt. Now, I didn't have any more debt than my peers, but I had all the trappings of so-called success. I had the yacht club membership and the German sports car convertible, the giant Rolex watch, the monogram shirts and Savile Row suits, the pied-à-terre in Manhattan, and the country house. So the first thing I did over 5 years is my wife and I got together and we sold off 95% of our tangible assets. And over 5 years, we converted the proceeds of that sale into a perpetual passive cash flow portfolio. I'll define that in a different video. A perpetual passive cash flow portfolio which created income and sort of supplemented certainly a portfolio that I started probably from my first paycheck, but certainly enhanced it. Then we paid off all our debt. And then we realized that we had at least 7 times our forecasted needs. And so we realized that we could quit our jobs and achieve the freedom we wanted, which was really the leisure to self-actualize. So let me summarize. A good moniker for my model is all cash flow, no debt. You can do what I did. What I did is not for everybody, but if this inspires you, then here's a goal and here's a way to get to that goal. I hope you found this useful.